I said clean up your room. This isn't a game.
Ha! Son, the art's not done. You think this is a game?
No way, but this is. Blockbuster Video gives you more action, more challenges, the newest and hottest video games you crave.
In my day, life was a challenge, not a game.
Well, now it's both at Blockbuster Video, where the challenge never ends.
Back in my day, as an early 40-something, I find myself using that phrase more and more often when talking with younger nephews or my son's friends or people who are just younger than I am. As I get older, I kind of love this though. I love pretending that I'm like this ancient soothsayer, a historian of eons long past where Netflix sent DVDs in the mail and we had 13 channel choices on the television. Phones were attached to the walls, electric devices weren't smart, and we thought blowing into an NES game magically made the thing work. And that's if they understand the concept of a cartridge at all. Rental stores elicit the same sort of wonder. In an era of digital delivery, streaming services, and an ocean of mobile games, roaming the aisles of a video store, picking games on the strength of their box art alone is a pretty foreign concept. And of all the long-lost joys of gaming days gone by, this is the one I'm the most nostalgic for. Scanning a menu of screenshots pales in comparison to the experience of exploration I found roaming Hollywood Video or navigating through the Blockbuster on Franklin Ave in Nutley, New Jersey while my family sucked down crab legs in a neighboring Chinese buffet. And I did it with my brother, a fellow adventurer in a sea of possibility. It was a bonding moment, something we still talk about to this day, and something most people born in the year 2000 forward may never ever experience. On this two-part edition of A Gamer Looks at 40, we wax poetic about the days of renting games from physical stores, what we played, where we rented, and all the memories that lie within. Time to grab your membership card, ask mom for a ride, and pray you are free from late fees as we dive into episode 81, The Memories and Magic of Renting Games, Part 1.
Video Game Mania is happening only at Video Game Exchange. Come in and trade those games you don't play for something exciting and different. At Video Game Exchange, you can try any of our used games before you buy. And if you have any questions, our sales staff can give you knowledgeable answers on any game in the store. Where else can you get selection, great prices, service, and trade-in value for your old video games? Only at Video Game Exchange.
Now, before we can start our journey exploring the aisles of our favorite video store, we need to find one. First up, we're going to talk about where we rented those games, those little mom and pop shops in our hometown and those big box stores that everybody knows. Joining us on this first lesson in geography is Mike Albertin of Games My Mom Found, Brian, also known as Day and Nightly on Twitter, Celeste of the Other Zelda podcast, Jodi, also known as Backlog on Twitter, and then finally Lucas White. I spent a lot of time as a kid renting video games because, as if you were, most kids I think were in the same boat. You got 2 games a year, one for Christmas, one for Easter, or one for birthday. If you're me, your birthday is 2 days after Christmas, so you are getting gypped. You get all your games at once, and then the rest of the year is just a dark time. It's just a barren wasteland until Christmas comes a knocking again. So how were you in the rental world? Did you rent a lot of games? Were you big into that world?
All the time.
Yeah,
I want to say almost every week. We lived near a Blockbuster at the time. And I had a few games, a decent amount, but we used to rent a lot. And we also, me and my father used Game Genie. So what we would do is we'd get our Game Genie booklets out. They used to come in the mail every month or so and had different codes, and we go through them like, okay, this is on this game, all right, and then we go to the store and I would try to find games to rent. But I remember renting games every week. That was how I was introduced to some of my favorite games of all time. I think that's how I was introduced to Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy IV, or 2 and 3 at the time, but it was through renting.
So you were cheating with your dad, like you were cheating even as a young lad. You were just cheating. You wouldn't rent a game unless you could find it in the. And by the way, you got monthly Game Genie.
I think it came monthly or every. I remember getting booklets in the mail every so often. This is a long time ago, and I was young at this time, so I don't really remember all the details. But I remember we'd get new ones every so often. There'd be new ones that would come, and we didn't buy them from a store, so I'm pretty sure they came in the mail.
You do realize I'm pretty confident you had to pay for those, so your parents were paying for you to cheat. Yep. You realize that? That's pretty amazing.
Me and my dad played a lot of games together, and he couldn't play very well.
Sure.
So we would, plus I couldn't either. And we'd want to see games, so we would use Game Genie called Infinite Life, stuff like that, so we could get through things. Like one game that we rented many, many times was Final Fantasy VI, not realizing, Final Fantasy III at the time, not realizing how long that game is. So we would always get to a certain point, like, oh yeah, the week's over, 5 days are over, gotta go return the game. And I always remember, and I finally bought it, but you were just. Or you would rent. I remember renting Final Fantasy IV for an example, play it for a while, and be like, "Oh, I gotta go take it back. Hopefully, I get the same copy of my save still there."
I was just gonna say, did you ever get an opportunity where your save file was still intact? Never happened, huh?
But I would play other people's saves.
Yeah, see, there you go. But everyone was getting to the same point. It's not like anybody took 5 days and just beasted out the entire world of peace or whatever it was, right? Like, no one ever got to the world of ruin in 5 days. So unless they were just completely,
not
going
back
all
then,
in.
Because there was no way to know what you were doing. But we rented a ton of games just because that was how I experienced a lot. I remember just going to like Blockbuster, for example, and just walking around and just, looking at all the different boxes, trying to find something that, just jumps out at you, which now is, and back then, especially covers were very misleading.
So let's talk a bit about renting games, though. So it sounds like when you had your Genesis, is that the era when you started renting games? And
no, actually, most of the games, which Wrath of Black Manta is the pinnacle, obviously, but most of it were in the Nintendo days because that's when buying the games wasn't really an option, but we would go and it's like, okay, we're going to see Grandma this weekend, let's like rent a game or two or just something different to play other than Mario, and again, from my mom and dad's part, it's not like they were, no, you can never play this. It's just like, no, we're just not going to have that at our house. So, we rented games and I went and did that, but I just had it at home. So yeah, it was actually with the Nintendo whenever I was much younger, like when I was primarily renting the games and, heading out to, all the different locations.
Gotcha. So even though you didn't have the console at home, you were renting games and playing other places like grandma's and games like friends and such.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's kind of how it worked. Okay, cool. That's interesting.
Sure.
So you still had the rental experience, but you weren't bringing it home.
Right.
When you went, where did you rent games? Was it like a Blockbuster? Do you remember what it was called?
Yeah. So I would say we moved up to Blockbuster. This is like, this is the sort of Wild West of video game renting, I would say, like whenever I first started, which is, there's a house that someone has converted to a video store. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, it's already looking kind of shady, and there's a definite shady section that you're not supposed to go to. What's over there? Nothing for us. You know what I mean? Okay. But they also, hey, kids are playing these, console games, all right, I'll do that. So that's where we would go. There was a place in town called Funview Video that, was not a chain, was just like a mom and pop. That was an actual video store, worked up to Blockbuster. Video Safari, I don't know if you remember those, that they had that. But yeah, originally it would be this. Yeah, just I'm thinking of one place in particular. It was a converted house into a video store, which is a barber shop now. So it's still going. It's still serving the public. Yeah, which is
cool.
Great. I'm assuming a different owner by now, but whatever the case, yeah, like that was my like kind of, okay, here's where we're going to go rent the games. And so this is, I have kind of an idea what I'm looking for from like I said, just like scraps, like the cover of a Nintendo Power that a friend has, or something that a friend told me about, or something connected with an arcade game, or what I would have heard about at Toys R Us. So you're like going in there and you're trying to remember what can I have, and then it's this not great lighting kind of place where it's just the cartridge. It's just the naked cartridge sitting there. And it's like, okay, so I've got to base it all on my gut. What's this look like? Oh, this has a ninja on it. All right. I like Ninja Gaiden. Let's try this. And, it was kind of hit or miss. I also, that's where I found out that just because, something has your favorite cartoon character, doesn't mean you like the game. A lot of Disney characters I really enjoyed. Liked. I loved Darkwing Duck a lot back in the day, but the game just destroyed me. But oh my gosh!
Darkwing Duck actually on the NES is a pretty good game. Play it nowadays.
Yeah,
it's a good game. Surprisingly good. But that's as a kid though, when you're renting it, how long were your rentals for? Do you remember?
It was for a week. Or
it was a week.
Yeah,
I keep hearing stories of rentals for a week. That never happened in my life.
Oh no, I'm
weekend. 3 days and done.
Oh,
Monday. I was.
Do you hear that? Do you hear that concern in my voice? I'm like, oh no. You're like, that's. I mean, oh my gosh, that's that 3. Oh, the fresh 3 days. Oh man, that is rough. Yeah, it was like, but they also had the thing where you could rent like for a week, or if you paid extra. You could have it for an extra week. So if you wanted, you could go 2 weeks, which I mean, you basically own the thing. Is what you felt like. But yeah, it was usually for about a week.
Well, let's kind of switch gears to renting. You mentioned at the open of Earthbound that you rented from these 2 kind of local places in Louisiana, and Earthbound was one of those rental experiences. Share with me a little bit about what your rental experience was. Were you like a weekly person, or what was kind of your experience with it overall?
Gosh, Fridays meant renting games and movies.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. So whenever my dad was working offshore, my mom was a teacher, and so I guess she would get off at about 3:30, and then of course we did as well. And she'd pick us up, and we'd either go somewhere to eat for dinner, or we'd pick up some food, and then we'd go to movie gallery. Every now and then we went to Blockbuster, but I think Blockbuster was a little bit more expensive, and I don't think you got to keep the games and movies as long. And we would go into movie gallery, or it was originally called Slick Sam's before movie gallery bought it, and just that. It was that experience. You walk in and they have movies playing on these TVs around the room to entice you and make you think, oh, I want to rent that. But my sisters and I, and if my dad were in town, not working, we go straight to the video game section. And they had such a huge Super Nintendo selection over there.
Nice. Just very nice.
The possibilities were endless. And that's what I looked forward to every Friday. I think I even wrote, I'm sure you had to do this in elementary school. Like maybe you kept a journal or something, or you had creative writing prompts.
Oh, yeah.
I wrote about renting video games sometimes.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, it's so fun.
What about
I love
you?
That.
Was every Friday like that for you growing up?
I would say probably maybe every other Friday we would be able to go to the rental store, pick up a game for the weekend, and obviously you just spend all weekend as much time as humanly possible diving into these games. I definitely had that experience as well with our local rental place. I can still picture what it looks like inside. I know exactly where the games were held. There's special sections at video games, and they had a pretty decent selection. It sounds like your selection was pretty awesome though.
So I'm from it's the 3rd biggest city in Newfoundland, Canada. Corner Brook is where I grew up.
Okay.
So Corner Brook It's about 20,000 people, not real big. And I was around 11 or 12 when we finally got a Blockbuster. So I do have a little bit of... I did rent a little bit from Blockbuster, and later Jumbo Video, which kept stuck around when Blockbuster closed.
Wow.
But when I was young, it was the convenience store. Hilltop Store was the name of the one. It was literally, I could walk there 10 minutes from my house. And They had a whole back wall that was behind the grocery section that was movies. And if you went around a little corner, there was one little wall of a bunch of Nintendo games and a couple of Super Nintendo games that I never rented because I never had a Super Nintendo.
Gotcha. That's so fun. So convenience store. That's cool. How long were the rentals for? If you remember?
So I think they were like $2 or $3.
Okay.
And that was for the weekend.
Okay.
But if you got them on Monday, they'd let you keep them till the next weekend because not many people were renting during the week.
Oh, okay. So you could rent them like Monday through Friday, but you had to have them back Friday for the weekend rush. Okay.
Yeah. And for the
that
weekend, that would only be like for one day. Like you could rent it for Saturday or for Sunday. But then you pay the same price to get it all week.
Oh, that's kind of lame. But that's not too bad because if you get it on Monday, you can play it after school or when homework is done. Yeah,
get your homework done quick and then you can play, right?
That sounds awesome. I love that convenience store. That's so fun. I also love the fact you had a rental house called Jumbo Video. That's just, I don't know, man. I
had an elephant for a little logo. And
that's cool.
That's where you could get they had free popcorn while you browse movies.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
Oh, yeah.
That's very
Jumbo
cool.
was a lot of fun. That's when I was an adult and actually had money. So I didn't do a lot of renting because I actually bought my games then.
Yeah. Well, yeah, as you do when you get older and you have disposable income, you're like, what can I do with this cash? Save it? Nope. Buy video games. Yep. That's what I'm going to do. Yep. Of course.
Yeah. Renting was a pretty big deal at that point for us. We didn't have the money to just go out and buy stuff, and it was usually like, a new game maybe once a year if the grades were good kind of situation.
Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we rented a lot. Like Donkey Kong Country was my first game. Came in the box. And then we rented the sequels before we ever owned them. We had, I believe it was Blockbuster at the time was where we mostly went.
Old school Blockbuster. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
And take me through a bit about, so you're renting games, this is like mid 90s, Donkey Country era. What were some of the things you were renting at the time? I mean, obviously, probably the bigger games of the day, but were there any like weird small games that you discovered in your travels in the rental shelf?
Yeah. I was really thinking about this, preparing for this, and one thing that really immediately popped out was like licensed games.
Yeah.
Which like, it sounds obvious, but when you think about it, like that's just not as much of a thing today. But like back then, there were so many, and it was like, at least the way I remember it, it feels like they were more interspersed just as like, these are the games.
Sure.
Whereas like, now it's like, oh, here's the, the bargain bin with the same kind of stuff.
Yep.
Or maybe it's just being a kid, you're more likely to just be like, oh, I know this character.
Right. Yeah. And your parents too, right? Your parents would be like, oh yeah, The Lion King's great. Yeah. We love The Lion King. Why don't you pick up that one? Or Ren and Stimpy was a big one for me, right? Like,
yeah, for me, it was the Chester Cheetah games.
Nice.
Those games were so weird.
Yeah, bizarre. All those weird Super Nintendo, especially those late era Super Nintendo cut and paste games, they felt like.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. I remember there were like Looney Tunes games. There was like the Pink Panther, Tom and Jerry, like all that. Like any cartoon I was watching on TV at the time.
Gotcha.
I was like, Bugs Bunny.
Sweet. Fantastic. That's so good. And invariably they were pretty bad. I think there's a couple of good ones in there, but invariably they were usually pretty bad. Do you remember, what else were you renting in those days other than the licensed games, which again I find that really funny and interesting?
Yeah, I think like From what I remember, definitely, I want to say Mario RPG and Yoshi's Island were two that like I would actually re-rent multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
Which I feel like I remember it like kind of annoyed my parents at one point.
Yeah.
Like, this is the one you got last time. Like, yeah, but like I never finished it. I want to keep playing.
Can I just rent this 10 more times? It's Mario RPG. It's going to take at least 60 hours. I don't remember how long that game takes, but yeah. Did you ever get this? Did you ever get the same save on the cartridge, or was it always gone?
I honestly don't remember.
Oh man,
I don't think I ever finished either game until I eventually had my own copy.
Right. But that was always a big thing too. I remember renting games over and over again to the point where you, even as a kid, I think, and I was probably like 12, realizing my dad could probably buy me this and it'd be a lot more cost effective than me renting Final Fantasy VI over and over and over again. You know what I mean? Like with fruitlessly trying to make sure my save stuck around, which of course never happened.
It's probably
funny.
a good thing I didn't trip over Final Fantasy at that time, because that's exactly what happened.
We'll talk about Final Fantasy hopefully a little bit later, if not another time. But yeah, man, I was a Final Fantasy kid since I was like in first grade. So for me, that Siren song was singing. That's pretty cool. Yoshi's Island's a good one too. That's a good one to rent over and over again.
It is. Any game like that where it was just like all the levels on the board. I don't know how else to put it. Like Donkey Kong Country, Yoshi. A lot of games, especially the licensed ones, it was just like just play the levels in a string, and if you get game over, you start over, and that's it.
That's it. And
like Yoshi's Island was like, oh, I can go back and forth. I can replay levels. It was a good one for rentals.
Were you playing that before Super Mario World? Sounds like it.
I think Mario World was actually one of the ones I got, like whatever that holiday was. It was like the Donkey Kong bundle, and then I think like someone gave me a copy of Mario World, and I think it was just like those two games.
Gotcha. Yeah, that kind of tracks, because of course Mario World comes out in 91. It's already an old game by then. Yeah, your friends are probably like, "Oh, here, you haven't played this yet? Here, just take that." That's pretty cool. Yeah. That's interesting though, that you probably had an experience with Yoshi's Island maybe before Mario World, maybe, but who knows, right?
Yeah, right up there. I mean, like everything was out at that point, right? Like I think one of the last games I ever got like at a store was like Kirby's Dream Land 3.
Nice. Very nice.
I'd like never played Kirby before that, but it was just like everything was out. So when it was like, oh, it's new game time, it's just this, wall of stuff.
That's cool.
I don't know what any of it is, because I don't have like the earlier reference point.
Think of all the mature, responsible things you could be doing. Helping old ladies cross the street, proudly maintaining your yard, hanging with your folks, or cleaning your room. But get real, you'd rather be playing video games. You can rent them from Blockbuster. They've got more of the coolest new Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and Sega Genesis games for rent than anyone in the world. So dudes, why not get your games at Blockbuster? It's the mature thing to do.
Continuing the conversation, we have Matt from the Backlog Busters, followed by Kyle VonKubik of the Read Only magazine, our good friend and pal, the Let's Play Princess, Joe of the SNES's Life podcast, and then finally Ian, also known as TeacherBloke85 on Twitter, shares what the rental scene looked like across the pond. So you grew up in Ohio, is that correct?
Yeah, I grew up in a very small town in Ohio, but managed to have had mom and pop video stores, and it had three of them. Had two different ones at one time, and then one closed and another one opened.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So you had two mom and pop video stores. Wow. Do you remember the names by off chance?
This is going to put where I grew up. The one that closed when I was younger, because the date, how long it was you used to pay like $10. You would rent the VCR and get 3 movies with it. But
that's awesome.
There was Suncoast Video.
Okay.
No, not Suncoast. That was the video. That was the movie store, wasn't it?
Suncoast was a movie store. It was actually Suncoast was a retail store.
Yeah, it wasn't the retail. It was similar to it. It was something Coast. It wasn't Suncoast. Now I don't remember that one.
That's fine. That's fine.
That one closed when I was like probably 9 or 10 anyways. But there was Our Town Video, and then the smaller one that opened to kind of sound like Clerks, which was the crappy one that Randall worked at, which is the one ironically I ended up working at because it was like 2 blocks from my house, was Gem City Video.
Gem City Video. Oh my gosh, I love that. Gem City Video. So you also mentioned because you worked at that store.
The summer I turned 16, I started working there.
All right, I'm going to go back to that because I want to hear some of your experiences actually working at the rental store. But I'd love to first go to your experience shopping there. What games were you attracted to at the rental store when you went there?
Of course, you're trying to get something new. That's when I finally played Dragon. I actually beat Dragon Warrior 2 from renting it somehow with the memory because nobody ever wanted to rent that one.
Wow.
And boy, do I regret not buying that one once they were selling it for like, $5.
Yeah. Were you able to keep your save?
Somehow I did because nobody ever rented it.
Wow. That's crazy. You're the first person. Ding, ding. You are the first person. Everyone tried. Everyone tried to keep that save.
That's the only game it worked on. I don't know why. I don't know how.
No one else rented it. They were intimidated.
No one rented it. I don't know.
Oh, that's great.
Don't get me wrong. I was probably renting it every 3 days as well.
That's great.
For my birthday, I didn't want cash. I was getting gift certificates for the video stores.
That's awesome. Yeah, right. What am I gonna do with cash? Buy clothes? No. I want gift certificates to the rental store. That's awesome. So obviously that was a big one for you. What other games do you remember? You sound like you rented a lot.
Oh, I rented a lot, especially after I started working at the video store because I would, I wouldn't be movies and games when I worked at the video store. I couldn't get like the new releases, but if I had, but if no one rented it and I was closing and opening next day, then I could take it. I wouldn't hold it back or anything like that. But the other game I beat by renting only was actually Super Mario RPG, and that was the last time I beat it. And that was a long time ago.
Do you have any strong recollections of renting games? Just the experience, where you rented from? We lived in Northeast New York area, so it's probably some similarities.
Sure,
Do you have any strong recollections of that? Yeah.
I do. I remember going to the grocery store first, and that's where we would get some Nintendo NES cartridges via rental, and then very quickly after that, Blockbuster kind of took on the scene. There wasn't a lot of mom and pops that I remember going into and renting games. I do remember mom and pop video stores, but they probably just didn't have a very good selection, if they had a selection at all for video games. I will say though, we both have a child of the same age, and I see a lot of people, online still being nostalgic about Blockbuster. I want to remind everybody, Blockbuster was an awful company. I get that you miss going to a place and walking around and that feeling, and you have nostalgia for it. But oftentimes, I remember going to Blockbuster in my 20s and walking around for 15 minutes and being like, I don't want to see anything here, and leaving and be like, well, that was a waste of gas, But what you miss is the excitement of being able to watch or play something that was your choice, right? And you can give your child today, if you want to share this, if you have children, you want to share this experience with your child today, by just simply bringing them to the library. I can't believe how the selection has changed and what's available at a library today. Just bring them to your local library. They have a selection of games usually, and you can let them check out games for their console at home. It costs you nothing now. So it's free. You just have to have a library card, and they get the same excitement of, what do I get to choose for myself for this 2-week period at my library? You can rent a game for 2 weeks. For me, when I was a kid, it was a weekend at best.
Growing up, I had a Super Nintendo, or the family had a Super Nintendo attached to one of those old TVs. I don't want to say old, but I mean, it was an actual dial TV where if you lost the remote and you wanted to change the channel or the volume, you had to get up and just click, click, click.
Oh no. How fun is that?
And I only remember renting one game on the SNES, and that is, and I had to look it up for the actual name, Maui Mallard in Cold Shadow.
What is this now?
We'll get there. Afterwards, a lot of PlayStation 1 games, a little bit of GameCube down the line. The last game I ever rented was actually on the Wii. It was Metroid Prime 3.
Wow, so you were still renting games back in the Wii era.
Yep, from Blockbuster and from Hollywood Video, different locations in Dorchester and Weymouth, everywhere.
Wow, okay. Dorchester. So you're from the Dorchester's northeast, right? It's like
I am from South Boston's South Boston.
Okay, so South Boston. Okay, so you were renting games up until like the Wii era. Man, I didn't realize you could rent games in that era. That was kind of way past my shelf life for it.
Probably when Blockbuster was just about ending.
Yeah, that sounds about right for that era. So I'd love to take you back to the beginning days for your Super Nintendo. I'm not going to let you skate on Maui Mallard. You're not getting away that easy.
Maui Mallard in Cold Shadow. It is a Disney game on the Super Nintendo, and I think it was also on the Sega Genesis. Yep, Sega Genesis, and I didn't even know there was a Game Boy port, so that's great.
Oh boy.
And it is, you are playing Donald Duck, but you're not playing Donald Duck. But it is absolutely Donald Duck as a character named Maui Mallard, who is this Magnum PI type character. And it is a weird platforming game. You have a gun and everything, and halfway through the game, you get the ability to turn to a ninja.
Yes, that's what I'm seeing here in these screenshots. My mind is still trying to wrap itself around, like, what am I looking at? Like, what is this property? He's blindfolded with like a nunchuck.
Yep. He's got a little bow staff and everything. You can use it to shimmy your way sort of upwards because there will be holes in the stage. And if there are two holes close together, you can shove the bow staff directly in between them and use it as like if you've ever seen Ninja Warrior, the ladder climb type obstacle,
Mm-hmm.
It's that.
Oh, that's so good. I love that. It sounds ridiculous. So that was one of your treasures or disappointments from the rental house?
That was the first time I ever rented a game, and I got about halfway through it, and I was just like, this is the weirdest thing in the world.
It is so strange.
I thought it was the weirdest thing, but then it just got weirder from there.
I have the blessing of living in central Illinois. Now, most people will tell you Illinois is an awful state, and I'm not saying it ain't. But we had one of the oldest and one of the longest lasting video store chains in America. So Family Video, they opened, I think, in the 1970s. And they didn't close down their last stores until 2021.
Wow.
So not only were they integral in my formative years, because there was one like 3 minutes away from our house, so my brother and I could just walk there, but I was able to share that experience with my kids. You know, we didn't have a lot of money growing up, and I'm not going to say I'm broke or anything, but when I had my kids, my wife and I didn't have a lot of money either.
Sure.
And so when they wanted to watch a movie or play a video game that we didn't own many of, we went to the video store.
I remember rental games, of course, in here in the U.S., but I'm really curious how it was in your neck of the woods. So when were you renting games? Where? I guess would be a good place to start, and we'll just take it from there.
Yeah, we had a couple of places that were, usual places that I'd go to rent games. There was one called Apollo Video. There's one called Clearview Video. I don't know if they were big chains or anything, but they were just the local ones that I knew of. And Friday nights would be, straight after school. My granddad would take me and say, "Do you want to rent a game?" Like, yeah, absolutely. And it was always Super Nintendo games for me. Those were the ones that I looked forward to seeing. And I remember renting quite a few of those. And there's still quite a few that I rented back in the day that I don't have in my collection now, and every time I see one, I'm thinking, "Oh, do I buy it? Do I buy it?" But we did have. Eventually, we did have a Blockbuster
in the local area. And that was great because all the game shops in my local area close at 5 o'clock. Blockbuster was open till something like 10 o'clock at night. So,
wow.
Yeah, if, my friends and I would just text each other and say, meet you at Blockies for a chat.
Nice. And remember where you grew up?
Yorkshire in England.
Okay.
It's the lovely, lovely heart of the beating heart of England, I like to think. But or as a lot of us would see, those typical Northerners.
Just want to send a very hearty thank you to the following wonderful patrons who support A Gamer Looks at 40 on Patreon. Thank you very much to Terry Kinnair, Greg Seward of the Player One podcast and Generation 16 series of videos, Games with Coffee, Patrice Millette, The Lex Play Princess, BT Goebbels, Tim Knowles of The Leadist, Julian of Nerds Without Pants, Seth Sergil of the All End podcast, Dan of Retro Logic, Ryan of Gamers Week, and finally, the one and only Pete Harney. If you'd like to join these fantastic people in their financial support of A Gamer Looks at 40, please go to patreon.com/A Gamer Looks at 4040. Check out the tiers, and if something strikes your fancy, please sign up today. Thanks very much for listening, and let's get back to the episode. So now that we've fully explored where we rented those games, those great local mom and pops with the amazing names, some incredible names, and I'm sure some equally incredible commercials that's been a blast combing through for the last couple of days finding audio for. Let's just talk about now what it was like inside those walls. What was our process? What did we as kids or young adults go to first? Were we at the movies first and then the games? Were we SNES? Were we Genesis? Did our moms and dads dictate where we went, or did we just go exploring? Throughout this process, we're also going to talk about games because that was a huge part of the process. That's what we ended up doing, was renting games at these amazing establishments. Starting us off in the conversation is Jodi, followed by Lucas. And then Mike Albertin returns, followed by Joe of the SNES's Life podcast. And finally, Ian comes on back to talk more about the experience of renting games at our favorite rental shop. I'd love to hear more about the convenience store. What sort of games did they have at the convenience store around the corner from the video section?
So I tried to remember all the games that I could. Okay. So the first one I remember renting was the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Heroes of the Lance game from Nintendo. Okay. I remember it specifically because my brother had it on the computer, but he had all the copy protection questions wrote down, and he wouldn't let me play it. So every time I tried, it would always just log me out because I was trying to guess, like, what is this character's dexterity in this? So I got a chance to rent it, and I'm like, yeah, I'm renting that. That game was horrible on Nintendo, I'll be honest with you. That game is so hard, and did not understand the premise of that game. You have to use certain characters to defeat certain enemies, and I did not get that as an 8-year-old.
Yeah, so you're not going to get that. I'm looking at screenshots of it, and it's like half the screen are just your character faces.
Yes.
And level bars, like...
Because it's the Dragonlance characters, and they were so famous from the novels so much. So the big draw with that was playing those specific characters who I knew nothing about. I just knew it was Dungeons & Dragons, and I wanted to play it.
Oh, that's really funny.
Dungeons & Dragons.
Gotcha. So you really need to know all the lore and the characters.
Yeah, like that one, I remember there's a blonde missus in it that has a blue crystal staff, and there's like a specific purpose to that staff in the whole novels and everything. It's like the Staff of Healing or something. I don't remember. I haven't actually read Dragon Age, but like it did not... I knew nothing. I just fooled around with it and kept dying.
Fair enough. That's fair enough, man. That's really good. I love that. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I'm thinking other games now. Chippendale Rescue Rangers is one I... anytime it was there, I got that.
Solid game.
Gremlins 2, the new batch, had a game.
Gremlins 2?
You actually played... what's the Mogwai's name? It's been so long since I've seen those movies.
It's been so long.
But the
I'm
Good
so with you.
Mogwai, right?
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
why I remember that name. But anyway, I remember you could get matches and like shoot fireballs with them. That game was hard too, but I loved it.
Oh, I remember this from Nintendo Power. I remember these screenshots.
Yeah, that was a really fun game.
It's actually a really cute game. Look at that.
Yeah.
That's really. It's interesting as you're going through them. It seems like it's a lot of licensed games, and I wonder if that's just because obviously the NES and Super Nintendo had a lot of licensed titles. People were churning these things out fast and
there's
loose.
only out of all the ones I've listed here, only 2 of them are not licensed titles.
See what I'm
that I can
saying?
think of.
And but why were we attracted to these games? I mean, Gremlins 2 is great. Who doesn't love Gremlins 1 or 2?
I never saw the movies back then. I watched them later.
See, that's interesting.
Yeah. My parents would not let me watch that. My brother did. So I saw the first one, but I never saw the second one. But the game was, I played the game a ton. And I don't think it matched. No, I know it didn't match the movie at all. But it was fun.
It's funny with Gremlins and Gremlins 2. It's, again, because I've heard these before too. I've been doing a few of these interviews now. And a lot of licensed games. And I wonder if these small mom and pops that were used to movies, right?
Yeah.
Gremlins, Chip and Dale obviously wasn't a movie, but was a known property, right? And what if they're like, oh, I know what these things are. Like, this is a rental place for movies. Maybe movie games would just be a natural extension, and they don't know, right?
Well, I remember going in one time and renting that Gremlins 2. And it's funny because I was with my friend David, and he was a couple of years younger than me. So I was 10, so I was allowed to rent any game I wanted. But that's a PG movie. You had to be 13. So they wouldn't let him rent the movie, but I could rent the game.
Oh, that's really funny. Oh, that's really good. That's right. Yeah, it's a PG-13. Yeah, okay. Interesting. So what else was there on the list?
Okay, Bayou Billy.
Bayou Billy, another one that's out of nowhere.
Yeah, I never got past that car level. I did the fighting level and the shooting level I loved. And I used to just keep renting it just to do those 2 levels. Never got past the 3rd one.
The cover art of that one is just bonkers. That's the kind of game I think that the cover art would sell you a bit.
It was. I loved Crocodile Dundee as a kid.
Well, there you go.
So I'm like, that's Crocodile Dundee, right?
That's it.
And that apparently the Japanese game's way easier and has nothing to do with Bayou. I watched a video on YouTube about it a while ago.
Okay.
It's like really easy, and like the Bayou Billy is just so hard.
Yeah, those early games are pretty. That's an early Konami game too, so that's a good developer. Adventures of Bayou Billy. I'm looking at the cover art, and cover art was a big part of the rental experience, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what sold you on the game. And again, if you were a Crocodile Dundee fan, this is like right up your street. Although it does look like, as someone else coined, like Wish.com, AliExpress, Crocodile Dundee, but
discount Crocodile, but it was a video game. Like
it was a video game. Yeah. That's pretty neat.
The Lone Ranger.
I don't know the Lone Ranger. Again, established property. Wow.
And that one, my dad was a big Lone Ranger fan, so
okay.
I rented it for that. It was fine. It was okay game. I never got too into it. The Simpsons, Bart versus the World.
Bart versus the World. I know that game pretty well. I know Bart versus the Space Mutants extremely well.
I think it's versus the World I played. It's the one that you start off in like China.
Yes, that's versus the World. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know if I ever passed China.
It's a brutal game. I mean, if you thought Space Mutants was hard, World is nigh impossible. It's ridiculous.
I only think I kept renting it because I loved the arcade game.
I don't remember in the arcade.
It was just The Simpsons.
Oh, right. Simpsons arcade. Yes.
Simpsons arcade. I think because I loved that, I kept trying this. Plus, I could get away with it. Mom would let me play the game even though she wouldn't let me watch the show. Not that I didn't, but she just didn't know.
Nice. That's funny. Yeah, another one where we probably weren't allowed to watch it too much. Yeah, World is brutal. I mean, again, I know a lot about Bart versus the Space Mutants. Again, not so much about World. That's funny.
There's one game I rented once, and I never have touched it since, and I don't want to. It's Total Recall. It is garbage. I hated that game. I rented it, and it was nothing like the movie. Like, I didn't get it at all, and it was just so hard.
That is a terrible, terrible game. Had you seen the movie?
Yes, because
you had.
Here's the thing: my mom wouldn't let me like watch Simpsons and like Gremlins, but Dad would watch Total Recall, and they'd let me watch it with him.
That's so weird.
I know, it's so. I had a really weird upbringing with that kind of stuff.
Listen, you and I now have a kinship here because I saw Total Recall way too early as well. I don't know why anyone thought this was okay to show like 11, 12-year-old Bill. I think my dad was probably watching it, saw me sitting there, was probably like, you know what, whatever. It's fine.
Did the eyes popping out freak you out as much as it did me?
On
the surface? Like that?
Oh God, yes.
Oh, that was so... Oh,
it still gives me the creeps when I watch it today. I love Total Recall. I think it's a fantastic movie.
Oh, I think so.
For some reason I don't know why.
I don't know
our
why it was
parents
okay
let
to
us
watch that.
That and RoboCop.
Yeah.
For some reason I was allowed to watch RoboCop. Again, horribly violent, 80s excess.
Not just horribly violent, like honestly, that thing in RoboCop, because I had the RoboCop NES game, I just owned that one. But the ones, those machines that would always think somebody was holding a weapon even when they weren't.
Right.
That part still gets to me.
It's tough.
The inevitability.
It's a really tough of a robot just perfectly tracking you and then filling you with 85 bullet holes. Yeah. I don't know. And RoboCop, to me, not to get on a side tangent, I think it's almost perfect. I love RoboCop the movie.
The first one, yeah. The second one.
The second one is fine. It's comedy. It's
the first one was that's a good movie. I love that movie actually.
Yeah, the second one it's fine.
It's fine,
but people really don't get down on it. It's just a goofy comedy for the most part.
Even the second Nintendo game actually. I played 3 Nintendo games for that. I only owned the first one, but I played the other 2. They're not bad.
Okay, yeah, but never played any of the games. Yeah,
rent them.
Okay,
just owned them.
Okay,
there was 3 other games at the place. 2 of them I never rented. Silver Blades and Jaws. Because we owned Silver Blades, so I didn't need to rent it. And Jaws, my aunt owned, so I used to beat it all the time at her place.
What was Silver Blades?
That's a hockey game.
Oh, is it like Blades of Steel?
I wrote that down wrong. It's Blades of Steel.
It is Blades. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I was going to say
Silver Blades is wrong. Silver Blades was the name of our local hockey team, and that's why.
Gotcha. Okay. Blades of Steel. I have many.
So I love that game.
I still play Blades of Steel every now and again. I'll throw on the emulator and just play a few rounds of Blades of Steel.
Yeah.
I'm a big hockey fan, so yeah.
Yeah, my cousin's husband got it, so every time I go visit him, that's what we play.
It's awesome. Take the pass. That's my favorite. It's great. It's a really solid, silly, fun arcade hockey game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it, man.
And there was one more they had, and this one I rented a lot. I never beat it, but my brother did. Feria, A Land of Mystery and Danger.
Okay. Feria. I'm looking these up as we go along.
Yeah.
Feria, A World of Mystery and Adventure. Okay. What in the world is this?
So it's sort of like Dragon Warrior. Like you do the same kind of building up your weapons and armor. That kind of RPG. You go around town. Except for some reason, like the whole royal family is sort of like based on bugs. Like they have antennas and stuff. And like the princess is a slug when you first meet her, though she does become a butterfly.
At least that happens.
But when you actually get into battle, they're actually little, like Zelda, like Adventure of Link type battles.
Okay.
So you still have to build up your weapons. Like your weapon is strong. Once you get a stronger weapon, it takes less hits to take out an enemy. But yeah, there's little action sequences where you fight.
That actually sounds pretty cool. That's actually pretty neat.
It's actually, I believe, the first. I can't guarantee it's the first. It's one of the first games where you play as a female protagonist.
Oh, cool.
For Nintendo, except you're actually a man who's been cursed to be a woman, and in the end, you undo the curse. I wish they hadn't have added that, because it would have been cool.
Wow, that's really strange. What a strange choice. I mean, I guess 1980s, they weren't thinking too far ahead, but...
Well, I remember...
Wow.
As far as I got, you saved the princess, and then the king would offer you her hand in marriage, and you'd turn it down because, no, I'm a woman. And that's when you found out you're a woman.
Oh, wow. So
But
that's
at
like
the end of the game, she'll actually accompany you because you change back into a man and go off with you to found your own kingdom.
wow. What a bizarre setup
It's
for
a really
game.
weird setup a game, but it's a really fun game.
That sounds pretty neat. This actually sounds like a pretty neat concept. I'm just kind of going through some of the screenshots, and like you said, the battles are kind of
pretty hard, like near the end. Like
yeah, I can imagine
those kind of games are, right?
Yeah, I can imagine. Sure.
Yeah, that's why I never finished it, but my brother did. I watched him beat the end. That's how I got the ending.
How funny! Look at that. And
I rented that.
Yeah,
at
go ahead.
8 or 9. Like.
Oh yeah,
young, right?
You're not handling that one. How did you make those decisions? How did you decide what to play? Like you said it perfectly. Wall of games, new to you, old to a lot of other people probably. How did you make those selections?
It was definitely like Donkey Kong was like such a great experience, like right off the bat. Sort of that became like the nucleus, if you will. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, so Donkey Kong, and we know Donkey Kong is sort of like adjacent to Mario, and then from there, I honestly don't remember why I picked Kirby. I feel like it might have been just the cover, like like bright cartoon character.
Totally.
And it still has like the Nintendo on it, so okay, this is Nintendo. Like those connections are kind of being made in my head at the time. Not super consistently, but I don't think I ever like went out and like, oh, it's my one purchase of the year, let me grab the Looney Tunes game. I think I was cognizant enough at that point to dodge those bullets.
No, that's cool. That's actually good. And I love the idea of, and we'll talk a little bit about maybe your experience also, kind of like walk through it a bit, but just this wall of games and just having these feels like limitless options, even for me as a kid, when I was doing that, I was probably at that point, I was probably 15, but I was still renting games because my brother was 5 years younger. So he was still at the era where he's renting lots of games, and I'm not quite at the age where I can have that disposable income to just buy games. Like that still wasn't a thing yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, having that wall sounds really fun and cool and good. Yeah, for sure.
It was like you were at Toys R Us, and it was like they had the cards.
Yes.
So it wasn't even like you could look at the case. It was just like flaps. And then at rentals, you were kind of at the mercy of like what was in stock still.
So your local rental place was a Blockbuster.
Yep.
Now you're young Mike Albertin. You're going into the Blockbuster with, assuming with your dad or parents. Where's the first place you go in the Blockbuster?
Probably just Super Nintendo games.
Super Nintendo games.
I love.
You're not even looking at movies. You're not looking at anything else. You're going right to games.
I was scared of movies too. I was scared of horror movies. I was scared of horror movies for a long time, but so I would kind of look. I wouldn't look at stuff like that. I'd stay away and just go to I like to look at games, and I would like to read boxes and pick up boxes and just look at everything. Probably another rental game I was introduced to would have been like Joe and Mac, that series.
Oh yeah, sure.
I know we bought that later on. I have the first one, but I'm pretty sure we rented it first. Because most games we would rent first. We would just go there. It was cheap at the time. You go rent a game and anything. It was $2 players. So yeah, Joe Mac would have been definitely one. Contra 3 would have been another one. I'm for sure I rented many times. Illusion of Gaia. That's a random game that I did rent, and I really liked. I didn't buy it till years later at another random used game store.
Yeah, and you've covered that game last year?
I don't remember when, but I know we did do it.
Too many episodes you guys do. What kind of games did you gravitate towards when you went to the video store?
Yeah, absolutely. So my brother, like I said, was a big Final Fantasy kid. So we would always rent things like Final Fantasy, Illusion of Gaia, Secret of Mana. And after that, it usually went straight to like platformers. So Mario games. The one I remember a lot was the 7-Up Spot game.
Ooh, yeah. Cool Spot.
And yeah, I feel like we rented that a lot for some reason. It's just that one's really in my head,
It's a good game. It's a good game.
The Mega Man X series.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, right on. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Did you have any games where you or situations where you rented a game and loved it so much? Like Cool Spot, you mentioned you rented over and over and over again. Were there any others that you found yourself going back to over and over again? Maybe to the point where you could have just bought it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, man.
So I think we probably rented Donkey Kong Country 20 or 30
That's so
times
good.
trying to beat that game.
That's so good. You probably, yeah.
We absolutely could have just bought it for the amount of times we rented that thing.
But there's something, you almost rented it. Like you were like leasing it. Like you were renting time with it, $3 at a pop, as opposed to like you said, $55 is not easy to come by. You know what I mean? As a kid.
Yeah. And I'll tell you the worst thing of it. And I guarantee you I'm not the only one who did it. But we only rented games on the weekend. Our parents wouldn't let us rent them over the week.
Yep.
So you'd rent it Friday night and you'd have it to Sunday. We'd do the 2-day rental. And then you had to hope that by next Friday night, not only that game was still there, but that someone hadn't rented it and deleted your save file.
Which happened all the time.
All the time. Because we did. I was guilty. As soon as you turn on, you're like, I'm going to delete all these and start my
Yeah, absolutely. Because I got to start my own thing. I don't want to piggyback off of somebody else's thing on my new game that I just rented.
We were awful children.
Shameless. You can't do it. Can't do it. I imagine it would have been easier in like the PlayStation era where all the memory cards were in your hand.
Yeah, you owned your own card that saved your games for you. That was nice.
That was pretty cool. So it didn't matter what copy or version of the game you had, you would always, or maybe you got like because they had like 4 different copies of the game. So you got like copy number 2 when you first started with number 4, and man,
I do remember in terms of trying to save your game. I remember my brother and we would take the game back to the video store and we would like walk around the video store for half an hour waiting for them to put it back on the shelf. And you know where this is going, don't you?
Go for it, yeah.
We would take it and go to like the 50-cent really crappy movie section and hide it behind a movie that would never get rented.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh my God, that's so good.
And I know that there are so many times we would go back the next week and it wouldn't be where we left it. So I know that the workers there probably saw us do it and immediately moved it back, but it didn't stop us from trying.
And it was just like a regular occurrence. Like every time you're like, oh, maybe this time we'll hide behind, terrible B movie horror ABC, and hopefully no one will notice.
Yeah, sometimes it would be there, but I want to say most of the time it was not.
That's really funny because you were going back every week, so it had to have stayed there for at least 5 days before you could do it again. That's really good. The biggest issue with renting, but the biggest risk was buying or getting something you didn't know what you're getting. Because sometimes you go on a Friday, like you were saying. And how long were the rentals?
Weekends for me. It was
all weekends.
Get it Friday night, take it back Sunday evening. Or if I was still enjoying the game Sunday evening, my parents would very kindly take it back on the Monday while I was at school.
Oh, that's nice. Very nice. I've heard stories of people saying they could rent games for a week. A week?
Yeah.
Who said?
It was dependent on. It was dependent on whether it was a brand new game or not. I think the brand new games, it was so much for 3 nights. But if it was something that had been out a while, it was a little less for 5 nights, for instance.
When you're a major star, you do things in a big way. Big cars, big house, big ego. Big ego. So when I want a movie, I want a big selection. No. I mean really big. Like a major video.
Here's big news for kids. Nintendo, loaded with surprises. Nintendo, packed with punch. Nintendo. Now rent a wide variety of Nintendo games at Major Video.
Don't miss all the excitement at Major Video.
And finally, as we close out this part 1 of our 2-part series, we start gathering random stories of renting days gone by. Starting off the final frame of this week's conversation, Brian and Joe of SNES's life talk about not only who they rented with back in the day, but how they've had the opportunity to get their kids involved today. So I just want to kind of linger on this a little bit. So you're at grandma's house, video games were something to look forward to, which is, I think, a really cool piece of the puzzle because a lot of us, I think, we had games at home. They were just there, right?
Mhm.
But you had to go to a special place to enjoy this. And so
Right.
you had Mario. What other games did your grandma have that you remember during that time fondly?
Well, we had Mario, and then just to tie it in with her one more time, she loved her shows, kind of stereotypical thing you might think. She loved her stories, her afternoon TV. So I remember playing Wheel of Fortune on the NES because she liked Wheel of Fortune. So like that's one of the games we rented because it's like, oh, well, she likes that, I'll rent this. And it was really, like Mario was the staple. Mario was, that equaled, that was fun. That was guaranteed. Depending on where we go with the conversation, that was the only guarantee you had of fun for video games at the time for me. So, I know other kids had, Nintendo Power, and of course I could, glean what I could from the, Toys R Us aisle and,
Sure.
Different commercials. But according to those, every single game was the greatest thing ever. And
Of course, right.
yeah, it never turned out that way. But Mario, so of course, Mario 1, 2, 3, and it's like those were always in there, and always getting played. And then there were just a whole slew of, kind of fly by the seat of your pants. Well, I hope this one's fun games that I would play and try out. But that was the main one. A couple other staples were, the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles,
Sure.
which was just simply for the love of that show and those characters. And I was terrible at it. And I only ever got past the dam level, not the expletive, the actual dam level.
Yeah.
I'm just realizing that as I said it. No, the level is a dam. And anyway. So I barely got past that, and of course there's the seaweed. Right before then, the electric seaweed. But so that was a staple I played all the time, though I wasn't any good at. I just loved it to have those characters.
Right.
Really those are kind of the main ones because I knew the characters, and that was guaranteed awesome every single time. The other ones was more of kind of a roll the dice situation. So, everything from, I'm just pulling these out for I remember playing Top Gun for the NES. I remember Wrath of the Black Manta. I remember, I know, exactly. I remember, and the first video game I ever beat, Puss in Boots, for the NES. You're this little cat. Boots. Yeah, and I would think there's maybe me and the team that made it, and another person that have played it, but I will never forget it because that's the first game that I beat. I couldn't believe I beat it. And of course that is, without Game Genie, which of course. Huge game changer. Totally. So yeah, it's Jack Nicklaus Golf. Really kind of, whatever looked cool that I could get my hands on, I would try. And a lot of the stuff has faded away with memories because, it wasn't that great. But,
sure.
The ones I do remember, Ninja Gaiden, tried those. Yep. Double Dragon, of course, played with my brother as well whenever we were there together, which was so great. Again, never got past a certain level, but far enough to be fun, and that's all you needed. And so you just played it over and over again.
That's really good. I looked up a couple of these. Wrath Black Manta. Is it Wrath of the Black Manta?
Yeah.
Wrath of the Black Manta. I'm looking up screenshots. I remember this game.
Oh,
there's one screenshot, and it looks like the enemies are these giant goons, and there's two ninjas throwing. So this is not Ninja Gaiden.
No,
but that's the name should be just not Ninja Gaiden.
Oh yeah,
Ninja Gaiden-esque. Yeah. And this image that I am staring at right now of two ninjas with throwing stars and this giant goon with a heart tattoo on his shoulder is ingrained. This exists in my brain somewhere. No, it's in a box.
It's I remember because it was so frustrating because you had so little to go on. At least I did, and it was just okay, this guy's a ninja. That's great. Ninjas are cool, and yet, game itself was so frustrating. I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to do. I mean, you could jump, and I remember, like, now that you mentioned you have the two ninjas. I remember you like got something that, you know, there was a copy of you, you know what I mean? So, you know, whatever, you threw a star, he threw a star, it was in sync. But I remember I was so frustrated with it. Like, so that's why that one is stuck in my brain.
So right after this, I'm going to go and look up emulation for Wrath of the Black Manta. I'm looking at screenshots. It is such a Ninja Gaiden clone. It's like Ninja Gaiden 0.5. Man, it's so funny. I love that.
And what other game back then, like, you know, the actual goons you fought, it was like Double Dragon, where, you know, they're just, you know, nameless, they come through, they're just bad guy. These guys like would have a sort of mini taunt. They would like just some text would come up on the screen, like sometimes before you would punch some of them, they would just have something to say, and of course they all looked the same. It was the same head every single time. So I would definitely check it out. I wouldn't play it, but I mean, it has been a while, so who knows? Maybe
this is amazing. I'm gonna have to. If I get back to streaming, this might be the first thing I do. So you mentioned that the rental places that you used to frequent is still around. Have you taken your kids there?
We've only driven past it, and I try to check, like, keeping it, you know, within every so often of when I would say, oh, that's where I used to rent video games from, because I know that's one of those things where, depending on who you're with, you know, some will, you know, always bring up the same stories, the same memories, and it's like, I got it, you know what I mean? So I try to keep it at a you know, bare minimum, but it's like, yeah, you know, right there, and what out of that barber shop, and it's like, well, it wasn't a barber shop back then, you know, and then I get to you know, tell them how we, you know, used to hunt dinosaurs, and, you know, we discovered fire, and way back then, and also we had to rent video games out of a store, you know, physical games. So
and he also sounds like you were able to share this rental experience with your kids, which is really cool. You know, I won't be able to because they just don't exist anymore. How was that experience for you? Obviously, you said when you had kids, you know, money was an issue, which anybody who has kids, money immediately becomes an issue. It's just what it is.
Yeah, it does.
Kids are expensive. How's that? When you think about that, how does that feel for you, understanding that you were able to kind of share this piece of your childhood with them?
You know, it was a lot of fun. I remember taking the kids to the store and watching them do the same thing I did as a kid. They'd go over to the video game section, and you go in on a Friday night, and they'd comb through the video games looking, for something that was there, and then staring at the back of the box, reading it, trying to decide, well, is this game going to be any good? And then they'd ask, to be like, is this... I mean, they have the fortunate thing that I am a gamer.
Right.
You know, my parents really weren't, so we weren't going to ask our parents for advice as kids, but they'd come to me and go, is this any good? And I'd look at it and I'd be like, well, I don't think you're going to like it. But good is, it's an open statement.
It's open to interpretation. Do I think you'll enjoy it? I think it's great. Maybe you won't.
Nielsen's Art and Video Games, the only place where you can get those hard-to-find games and systems. All your favorites from way back to the new PlayStation 2. Nielsen's has over 1,500 games for rent and sale, and now renting DVD movies. Nielsen's has a large selection of machines, including the original Nintendo, Atari, and PlayStation 2, plus lots of rare video games. Rentals start at only 49 cents a day. Come see us today for a wide selection of DVD movies. Nielsen's Art and Video Games on the Jadwin side of the Uptown Shopping Center, Richland.
And finally, to close out this episode, Matt returns to share some other stories of renting games back in ye olden days. Mike Albertin chats about renting games with his uncle. And then finally, the Let's Play Princess shares a really interesting and frankly touching story of how renting video games wasn't just a pastime, it was also a pleasant, needed distraction. Any other memories of the video store you want to share before we kind of move on to some other topics?
The video store, I don't know. I still remember, outside of gaming, still remember when you learn about the the not so proper hidden, how to put this, hidden anatomical thing in the original cover for The Little Mermaid. I remember seeing that, like somebody said, I'm like, no, that's not real. That's just a rumor. You thought it was like a, an urban legend. And you look at the castle and like, nope, that's
there
a
it
penis.
There it is. Hello. Hi there.
And it's not, it kind of looks like one. No, it was one.
Yeah, no, it's pretty clear.
Oh yeah.
The intention there. Yeah, for sure, man.
Just quick side note, everyone that asked for the adult movies, they were all old men.
I can't imagine anyone younger being hi, I'm 23. I'd like to go to this section, please. It had to be. It's so weird. I don't know, man. I would be mortified.
Yeah,
mortified.
You got adult movies? No, you gotta go to the other video store, the good one.
The good one that's not quite so centrally located.
Oh, I do have one good story with renting since you brought this up. Or you
go for it.
When you talk my memory, and I get to share it. So when I would go to Georgia every year and visit my grandparents. My father's side lived down there, and so did two of his brothers. And I remember one night when we went down there, we rented an N64, or my uncle did. Because I brought some system, but I didn't bring that. So he rented an N64, and he picked out a couple games, and one of the games that they rented was GoldenEye. And so I remember that night I went to sleep, but the three brothers, my father and his two brothers, who hadn't seen each other, we see each other once a year, but they hadn't lived together in years, and they sat down at night all night. We're just playing GoldenEye. It's like 2 a.m. or something.
Oh, that's cool. They basically reverted to how they were as kids. That's really
and they got to experience that, and it was a one-time thing. It never happened again. I do know that I think we rented a PS2 when we were down there a different year, because I remember playing Silent Hill 2 for the first time was in Georgia in a house that had a mile before you got outside of their property onto like a driveway.
Oh,
and
wow.
Another couple miles of a few houses in the middle of nowhere in Statesboro, Georgia, which is a little town with a big attraction with a Walmart. So my ass was terrified. So, there's nothing like playing Silent Hill 2 in the dark when you look out and you just, and you hear rattlesnakes everywhere, by the way, too.
Oh, gosh, so that's crazy.
Oh, it was, that was, and those some of my better memories with renting. Like, it wasn't, for me really doing it. It was, my uncle renting games. Like, oh, this looks cool.
That's a really cool memory. That's I can imagine how fun that would have been to reconnect over a game. And right now, as we're recording this, for some weird reason, over the last couple of days, it's been an N64 Bash Fest. I don't know how this happened. in my circle, it just turned into like the N64 stinks, and I'm looking around like, what happened? Like,
it's okay.
Is it getting canceled for some reason? Did the N64
for making bad games?
Yeah, but I mean, for some reason, it's that discourse is happening, and just that story of is your uncle, right? Your uncle and his brother.
None of them knew how to play, so I remember them all holding N64 controller the wrong way. Your thumb and your finger moving the control, and
yeah, they're holding the whole controller in one hand and just moving the stick with their two fingers, and
it was
like an Atari controller.
We only did it
funny
that 1 or 2 years. I think it was 2 different years, because after that, I would just bring a system with me.
Sure,
and that was also you could rent systems at Blockbuster at one time.
Which is weird.
You had to put a deposit down, but you could rent.
You could rent a system at Blockbuster.
And it came in a big box. I remember that, a really big box.
I can imagine. I tried to get a forklift. Hey, can you forklift this into the trunk? Because they didn't want you walking out with it.
It was cool.
I'm sure.
It was.
That's a really
it was something
cool
that
memory.
I think we lost out on. That won't exist anymore.
Anything else as you kind of got forward? Because you said you were renting like Wii games and whatnot. Which I find crazy.
Are you willing to hear this story is the question.
I'm willing to hear every story. You should know this by now.
Okay, so I have to warn that this might be a little weird, and I don't want to say it's a dark story, but it's definitely in a weird situation.
Okay.
So at my dad's place, I never rented games, at least to my current memory. Rented movies, absolutely, sure. Never rented games. So since I was born in 1991, this would be around when I was 16, 17 or so. But, Bill, you love your parents, right?
Sure. I sure do.
Yeah.
I sure do.
So I was still in the mindset of, mom and dad could do no wrong. Ha, 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 ha.
Right.
So there was a weekend, and I was picked up, got told I could rent a game. Okay, cool, awesome.
Yes.
I've played Metroid Prime 1 and 2, and the local Blockbuster that's still open has Metroid Prime 3. Heck yeah, let's go. And then he goes, cool, you're staying here this weekend? And it's about an apartment building that's 2 rooms, 25 miles from the actual place I'm supposed to be staying that weekend.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's, oh, yeah, this is my friend. And we'll be staying here this weekend. And it just, next weekend, or, 2 weekends, whenever he picked me up next, don't tell your stepmom.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you weren't aware of what was going on?
No, I didn't know about the crazy affair stuff that was going on. I just knew awesome video game rental.
Yeah, wow. Wow, how interesting. So your dad basically kind of said, "Hey, let's rent a game," but not to just kind of give you something to do while you were in a place unknown with people unknown.
I knew her a bit. I don't think I knew her kids at that time, but I knew her just from hanging out every once in a while. But
interesting.
I did not
Wow.
think that was going on.
No. Wow, what a way to find out. I mean, at least you had a game to keep you company with it, but I mean, still interesting. And that's interesting that your dad, that was the surprise, like, hey, we're going to rent a game. And you're thinking, oh, wow, sweet, awesome. And then next thing you know, you're in, again, apartment unknown and place unknown for the weekend.
Oh, God,
wow.
WarioWare Shake It was the other Wii game I rented.
Okay.
It's coming.
No, you're fine. Wow. Okay. Well, that's pretty intense. I mean, I can imagine that being pretty intense experience for you. But do you remember? Was the game actually there? Did it help? I mean, I can imagine that being confusing, more confusing than anything else.
No,
but,
I was pretty much intoxicated with Metroid Prime 3 that weekend.
Yeah, Metroid Prime 3 pretty good. It's not my favorite of the 3, but I think it's pretty good. Wow, yeah, that's thank you for sharing that story. That's pretty cool. But again, not cool obviously what was going on, but cool that you had something to do and actually distract you a bit from what's, again, a pretty intense situation.
Here's the darker side of the rentals.
the distraction side.
But even then, that just means that renting a game can sometimes be this little escape from the reality. That even if you don't know it's there, you're still escaping from it.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a protective blanket, I think. Just again, hearing the story for the first time. Yeah, it sounds like it was a bit of like a protective kind of thing where you were in this uncertain space, but you had a game to play and that was able to distract you or shield you or just something to immerse yourself. And Metroid Prime 3, I mean, what better way? I mean, you could sit there for hours and roll through those hallways. And
I mean, Metroid is my favorite Nintendo series, so it definitely engrossed me over that weekend.
Hope you enjoyed part 1 of our 2-part jaunt through the world of renting video games. Next week, we're going to talk about games. Lots and lots of games. The titles we fell in love with at first rent, the disappointments that ruined our weekend, and make some attempts to get back inside the brains of a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old walking the aisles of a video store and just see if we can get ourselves back in that headspace so we, as adults, can get a glimpse of what it was like exploring video game rental stores as kids and maybe as adults. Thank you so much for checking out this edition of A Gamer Looks at 40 if you haven't done so already. Twitter is where I mainly hang my hat. Just check me out there on A Gamer Looks at 4040. Linktree in the bio gets you everywhere you need to go to support the show in any way possible. As always, tell a friend, tell a family member, tell a random person on the side of the road. If you like retro video games, this show is the one for you. And if you have stories, I still want them. I'm always collecting stories from people who love video games, who grew up in these eras, and want to share those, who knows, those really cool stories you may have never shared before. Till next time, thank you so much for listening to A Gamer Looks at 40, and please be kind to yourselves each other's, and those videotapes that I hope you rewound.